Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today, and for those of you returning from yesterday's program, and especially a huge thanks to all the artists involved in this screening series. It was such a fantastic 2 days of really incredible works. And thank you again to the entire team at LACE for all your support over the past few months in putting this together and helping bring it to life. And my name is Carrie. I'm an artist and educator based in Los Angeles. And my art practice primarily revolves around 3D animation and installation, but like many of you who share similar backgrounds of living in between cultures, memories of home in relation to intercultural experiences is something that is a through line throughout all of my personal work. And as the 9th immersion curator at LACE, it's been just such a fantastic experience being able to have memorable and meaningful conversations with other artists who dive into these themes and hearing their stories and experiences. So I'm really glad that we're here today to dive deeper into all of your works. And I mentioned this in our conversation yesterday about how the screening series emerged particularly from the standpoint of living between cultures, navigating diaspora, and how artists excavate and revisit memories today. For those of us with immigrant and transnational backgrounds, our stories are woven from bits and pieces that are often forming narratives that are fragmented and associated. We find connection through sound, light, textures, and history, elements that help us navigate our present. Our dialogue today will dive into the complex language of memory and how it shapes our narratives and the ways each artist translates these intangible threads into their work. So I'll just go ahead and introduce all the lovely panelists and read the bios. Yuchi Ma, on the left over here, is an artist, filmmaker, and parachute kid from Beijing, China. After getting her BFA studying film and TV production at USC in 2019, Yuchi earned her MFA degree in Design Media Arts at UCLA in 2022, and we were actually the same year. In the past, Yuchi has exhibited with various galleries and screening spaces across the US, including LA Art Corps, FOCA, and many more. More recently, Yuchi's short film Red Threads, that we all just watched together, won the Grand Jury Prize in Experimental Shorts at the 2023 Slam Dance Film Festival. Go Yuchi! Next to me right here is Coffee Kang. Coffee is a conceptual visual artist based in Los Angeles, primarily working with photo, video, installation, and performance. Coming from a photographer's background, she embodies ephemera in her works with a strong interest in site-responsive art and alternative gallery spaces, actively exploring the theme of temporality. As a queer, a visa holder, an artist of color, and a metaphorically unhomed body caught in a liminal space at the intersection of identities, Kang reflects a sense of loss and longing by making attempts to see and seek in her works, incorporates aesthetics of melancholy and absurdity, and invites the audience to engage with the narratives of impermanence. Kang holds a BA in Creative Media from City University of Hong Kong and an MFA in Photo and Media from CalArts. Her works have been showcased at The Box, Last Projects, Mac Center, Launch LA, A Room to Create, and LA Encore. Thanks for being here with us, Coffee. And next to Coffee, we have Evelyn. Evelyn is an interdisciplinary artist, filmmaker, and educator based in Los Angeles, working with photography, video, text, and installation. Evelyn invests how her personal experience moving between China and the US informs her cultural identity. Her work is invested in issues of race, gender, history, displacement, and collective memory. She has exhibited at the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery, the New White Gallery, and the Mack Center for Art and Architecture. She was an Armed with a Camera Fellow with Visual Communications, the Media and Production Fellow for Arts in a Changing America, and the Research and Archive Fellow for China Ali Preservation Society. She received a BA in Political Science and Media Studies from UC Berkeley and an MFA in Photography and Media Art from CalArts. And then we also have here Ainslee Alem Robson, who is an Ethiopian-American director, writer, and media artist who crafts emancipatory narratives and counter-imaginings, combining film, archival materials, installation, and game engine technologies, speaking to the liminal spaces between Africa and its diasporas. Robson's works present temporal manipulations from positions of decoloniality, decoloniality, that actively refuse linear definition. She is a former Sundance Art of Practice Fellow and Sundance Humanities Sustainabilities Fellow. Her new work, Revenge the Film, was installed in the Guests from the Future category of the curator's special projects in 2023 at the Venice Biennale, curated by Leslie Loco. Welcome everyone, and thanks for being here. Round of applause to all these artists. Let's just dive in. I think we can start with Yuchi here on the left. In our conversations throughout grad school at UCLA, we spoke a lot about our shared experiences of being in between, and honestly, our conversations have really inspired even this screening program in general through LACE. We've had just wonderful dialogues about what it means to be in between and how we each as artists represent memory and what the language of memory looks like with the mediums we use. And my question for you is, can you tell us a little bit more about your approach and your relationship to using game space as a cinematic medium in your sort of language of memory through red threads?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, to introduce my work a little more, I feel like, so that's fine. I think, so I'm a parachute kid, first and foremost, as Carrie mentioned, and if you're unfamiliar with the term, parachute kids are unaccompanied minors who are sent to study in the US from as early as second grade. And for me, when I was about 11 turning 12, my parents sent me to go live and study in Texas by myself. And so I think this background has shaped a lot of my experience and this work, which is very personal. I think while I was doing research for the background of this work, one book I was reading called, I think, Racial Melancholia, Racial Dissociation, it mentioned how parachute kids sort of, they exist as psychologically nowhere. And I thought that was very, very interesting, especially because I think with history of the sojourners who've gone west and parachute kids in general, you're meant to have an experience of being psychologically everywhere. But I think the very fact that you cannot lay down roots in just one place, you have to go back and forth. I think existing within our current system institution, which relies heavily on strict binaries, that puts it in a very difficult place. And so I think first and foremost with using Sims in this video, I felt it was a very apt metaphor of my American experience, where I've been here for 10 plus years. I've had friends, time, a lot of experiences here, but politically speaking, officially, I don't have the visa, I don't have the paper to allow me to continue to stay here. And in that sense, it felt very much like a life simulation game, especially I think also considering the economic history and incentives behind China and the US in promoting, I think, this kind of immigration and trend. And then secondly, I think using the game engine, a lot of this consideration comes from, I think, thinking about the screen as an interface, especially because the first iteration of this work had a sculptural body. I was thinking a lot about screens, and most of my communication with my parents are done through video calls. I think there's this desire of the screen in the video being a portal or a window to see through it, when in reality it's an interface. And I think like the interface between people, in this sense, I think, it reflects my present conditions and what I'm thinking and vice versa. And so I think in creating my reality here and bringing my mother's sim in, it's sort of my attempt at, having both at the same time, even though we exist in a very one or the other type of world.
Yeah, I remember back in grad school when you first showed me the sim that you made for me. I felt so honored that I know that you consider me as a friend and that I'm living in the simulation that you're building. I'm really curious to hear more about your relationship to the other sims you've built, especially with your mother and other friends who may be close to you or they may be living at a distance to you. How do you relate to them in the simulation versus thinking about your sort of physical distance from them?
I mean, first and foremost, I love my sims very much. And I love making sims. And I don't know, I do think when I'm making it, I do feel like you have to work with the material. And before I make someone, I was like, manifest before I close my eyes. Like before I do it, just thinking about what the person looks like, and what you want this game surface to start looking like. And I really think that works. It really works so well. And I just feel like there's some sort of spiritual connection while making it. And I think the thing is, like when I fly back to China during my breaks, I'm really lonely, I'm literally bored. All my friends are in America. I do play with their sims a lot. Because I'm like, what do I do? And then with my mom in particular, I think there was one line of text in the video from what my mom told her mom as a child is, you know, if you come watch me perform, I cannot dream on stage anymore. And I really related to that sentiment, but I think this piece I made also to tell my mom I really love her, and that my attempt to bring her into this reality is me telling her that I'm making, you know, efforts to bridge these two realities.
Yeah, I still remember receiving updates from you when you were playing with my sim. That made me very happy to know that I'm existing in both worlds. Yeah, and I know you just expanded a little bit on the Chinese title, 我很爱你, which means I love you very much. I'm curious to dive a little deeper into the Chinese text because the English text Red Threads is quite symbolic, where I love you very much, 我很爱你 is such an emotionally charged sentence. How does that relate to your connection with home and belonging?
I think this piece is very much about the sort of filial love and guilt that's associated that I feel toward my mother, I think motherland, my country, culture in a lot of ways. I feel that in my discussions, you know, with my mother behind choosing US or China, for her it's not just me choosing one place, it's because I feel politically about this in some way, it's because I feel about that. And I think I was, you know, when mentioning Sims, like, I felt like this was a simulation of my American experience, but at the same time, I think existing as Chinese without having lived there in a long time also feels like, what does it mean to be Chinese? You know, what are these terms and values that I'm taught I have to follow? In a sense, like, I love you very much because I feel like there's no other choice other than to love. But at the same time, I do love her very much. And I think red lines sort of represent lines of fate in Chinese culture. And the act of wrapping them around each object, there's this feeling of from bond to bondage, you become increasingly more entangled in this feeling that is very difficult to parse through. And then I think one last thing about what you said about Chinese text translation, I think for those that can read Chinese, the way the poem is translated, the music that is used, the titles, there are a lot of very specific intercultural cues, which I think also very much relate to the theme of this screening, what does it mean to create memory image, etc. I think for me, this piece is first and foremost for myself and for people who have shared similar experiences and cultural backgrounds. And so in that way, I think they would be able to, you know, sort of unlock the key to this also in more layers.
Yeah, amazing. One thing that I really enjoyed about your piece is the multi-layeredness of it, where you not only include symbolic movement, but also these visuals and the way they're edited together. They really trigger physical memories for me, physical memories related to touch, taste, even smell, and emotions that are really nuanced and complex, ranging from pure happiness on the dance floor to a certain type of melancholy. And I think moving on to Ainslee, I think your work also imbues itself with this sense of multi-layeredness, and the sort of mix of footage you have creates this really sensorial experience. And for me, it felt like multiple worlds colliding and unfolding at the same time. Could you tell us more about the process behind making the film and how feelings of nostalgia and notions of self-liberation and decoloniality were explored throughout the process of making it?
Yeah, so, oh, is this on? Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I guess we'll start from where I'm from, which is technically I was born and raised in Cleveland, but my mother's Ethiopian, and I grew up in the context of the inner city of Cleveland, but going to private schools in the white suburbs. And my parents had this Ethiopian restaurant named Amidst in the middle of the inner city, and it was we had a tiny Ethiopian community, tiny Ethiopian diaspora, tiny Eritrean, even African diaspora. And so it was really this kind of a landing ground for a lot of African immigrants in Cleveland and in Northeast Ohio. So this was the only restaurant or gathering space of that sort for almost 30 years. And I really latched onto all of the meaning that space holds, because there was this constant duality of place and what I could access from places. So for example, I'd go to school and it was Eurocentric. I wouldn't learn anything about Ethiopian history, African history. And then I'd go home and hear the story of Empress Aitu, the namesake of my parents' restaurant, over and over and over again as my parents would explain this to customers, just simply asking, oh, what's the name mean of your restaurant? And Empress Aitu, for those of you who don't know about Ethiopian history, is the reason why Ethiopia was never colonized. And so there's this fragmented image of her and Emperor Menelik in one of the shots, and then there's also this recurring image of this painting of the Battle of Adwa that you see filmed, but then you also see it as this photogrammetry, this point cloud reconstruction. So I was thinking a lot about the reconstruction of narratives, the reconstruction of what does home mean, where is home? How can it be this impossible geography spanning between Cleveland and Addis Ababa, where I had never lived, until later on, where I lived for 3 years. But how is it that both of these places can never physically exist together, yet are always with me? So, in the film, I'm like straying from your question, but
that's beautifully said.
But I wanted to say that one of my main intentions in the film was to make you question where you are in any given shot. Are you in the restaurant in Cleveland, which is this portal into Addis? Are you there reminiscing and feeling nostalgia about Addis, or are you in Addis Ababa remembering Cleveland? And from shot to shot, they kind of like interrupt each other, and then there's this repetition where suddenly you're seeing something as a point cloud that you saw that was filmed, and it's this like counter site that reinforces this kind of excavation of memory and search for home.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I think definitely throughout all the footage that you have here, the mix of photogrammetry and the questioning between where am I? I mean, I personally, I've never been to Cleveland or Ethiopia, but I feel like I can relate to many parts of it because you're bringing in image that feels so intimate and physical. Like, I feel like I could just almost smell like the taste of the grape or
In general.
and sounds that you've included within the film. I'm curious to hear more about what you think of the sound for this piece and what your process was like in using sound to create a sense of presence.
So for the sound as well, well, I guess to talk about the sound, now I have to tell you about how I made the photogrammetry scenes. So I collected the sound fragments from all of these videos that were that I collected from friends and family that were sent. They were all captured on mobile phones, and so I had friends in Addis or Cleveland capture these spaces, and then I used the videos to make the reconstructions, but then I used the sound to incorporate into the sound design. And as I was editing, I was playing a lot with the dislocation, sonic dislocation, and intentionally placing the viewer in, a sonic landscape that just didn't match with what you were seeing, yet are very much entangled. And so I think maybe one of the strongest examples of that was there's a part where you hear a call to prayer, and you also hear this Orthodox Christian prayer. So it's almost 50% Christian and Muslim in Ethiopia. And one of my earliest memories, going back there, was hearing the layers of the city and hearing these fragmented, just this loud, raspy call to prayer through a terrible speaker, but then also hearing the Christian one and thinking like, what is this place? Like it has all of these, that's just one duality, but it also was just situated in my memory as like this distinctive auditory fragment of memory that that's really associated with my sense of Addis Ababa. And then to layer that on top of Cleveland, it just really, played into this tying them all together practice of weaving these memory.
Yeah, totally. And in our conversations, you've mentioned the idea of liminality a lot too, this idea of being in between spaces, which I feel like a lot of the works throughout the screening series explore. Coffee and Evelyn, and your work to draw a house, which is a recent commission that's still currently on view at LA Art Corps, right? Within like a physical installation. You're checking.
It's done.
It actually just closed.
Okay. Well, you got a glimpse of it here. Yeah, but the recent commission took you on a journey to Angel Island and Snake River. Both are places with deep historical ties to Chinese diasporas. And you mentioned that you came across really haunting and interesting remnants ranging from archival documents like coaching papers, which maybe some of us know what those are, to found objects in nature like shedded layers of snake skin. And I think in your piece, it's an exploration of movement, of nature, of tracing, but also exploring the in-betweenness of larger contexts relating to Chinese diaspora, and as well as documenting your personal experiences as people living in between cultures. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about, first of all, your emotions and revelations that you experienced while you were going on these visits to these sites.
Hello. I have my first feeling of after the screening, also like after looking at all of his films, was that I feel like all of us as diasporas were like seeking for the truth, or seeking for something, the belonging or the home making process through the other world. Like some of you are exploring it in the Sims world, some of you are exploring it in the point cloud world or photogrammetry. I don't even know what point cloud is, but thinking about like digital world or the other interface, I guess our trips or our process of seeking happened in like seeking for some ghosts, or like, I mean, definitely we didn't know that we will be encountering ghosts, or like, I wouldn't say that we actually encountered any ghost, but definitely there were a lot of signals that we encountered on those sites, and some of them being the rattlesnake, the rattling, but we never saw the rattlesnake, but we just saw the shedded skin, and the waves that a boat was, there's no boat, right? Like there's so many things, and also there was a bird that was following us at the cemetery, like making signals. So like I feel like all of those, I already forgot your question, but I'm just thinking about, all of those like signals from the other world, and it's just haunting us, and I guess that's my biggest revelation.
I don't know if I have a biggest revelation, but I just think the whole time of us going to these places, like Coffee said, is looking for the invisible and non-present bodies that we probably will never actually visibilize, but also putting ourselves in those spaces, not necessarily in place of them, but maybe putting ourselves in the spaces that they occupy, even though it is kind of this intangible thing that we're trying to look for. And yeah, a lot of things that we didn't plan for, but we just had a sense of something's there, someone's there, but never able to grasp them. So yeah.
What was that process like? Like, did you plan out specific sites that you knew, like I definitely want to visit this one and that one, or was it more sort of unexpected and sort of one thing led to another?
I would say both. I mean, we had, obviously we did our research before going to these places. Angela being one big part, and then Idaho was the craziest one. But also, like, we went to UC Berkeley's Ethnic Studies Library, is where we found these archives. So I think there are all these people that were there and then they now exist in very different spaces. And then they left some things, not a lot. And then it is for us to kind of do our research and try to look for them. But then there are a lot of things that just couldn't be done through research, through like reading a book or looking at the archives. And we have to be physically there in order to experience it. I think that's sort of the process for us. So it's like one led to the other, but also there's a mix of both.
Yeah, I feel like there are so many unspeakable things, just like homemaking for us. Like, it's just really hard to say where I belong nowadays, and I think that's also what Yuchi and Ainslee is feeling. Like they could have mentioned it, but like where am I? Like where are we now? Even so that's I guess the question that we posed on those trips and asking like where are they? Where are we? So that's
Did you come to any thoughts like in response to your own question about where you are right now?
Probably I'm with you all right now. I guess I'm at the place of truth seekers, Philosophical Research Society. I guess that's
That was a trick question.
We're also everywhere,
We're everywhere.
I feel like everyone is giving space for the in-between and making it a space, so that is home, right?
That's really well said.
I think that's really interesting. I'm going off script, but I think from rereading the Show H. Gabriel essay that has backed a lot of the thoughts in this proposal, he speaks about how truth exists in between sides of memories, and in this exploration through the ruin, it's always something nomadic and ever shifting. And I think that we can all really relate to that in this continued process, especially I think thinking about both each of our films, as something against an official constructed state history, which is something that comes at a suppression of otherness, versus like going in and searching for that. You can really feel that sort of thing.
We're going off script now.
Did you want to
I want to follow up. Yes, I agree. Exactly that. It's like a lot of our work is about questioning the authority of state-censored history or documentation of what goes into the archive or what doesn't, and then I just thought about how Coffee and I kept talking about during our process about memory making, Sorry, we forgot about everything that we that was part of the process, but. When we were looking for, we were trying to look for some history, right? We're looking for some history, but because there's nothing there, so we started conjuring our own imagination about this history that just could not be found because they were erased. So to us, it's memory making becomes, looking for this history is also almost in a sense same as memory making. So we're recreating these memories in a way. So kind of what both of you were talking about. Where are we?
That's really well said, everyone. Thank you. I think we're ready to actually get some questions from the audience, and we'll do a little Q&A here. If anyone has any questions for the artists about their work or their process, feel free to come up to the mic. We have a mic over here.
Not all at once. I have a question. So, a lot of the works kind of are in conversation, and yes, very, very, very obvious threads. But I'm curious, how what have been the responses from say family members or from close people who you've kind of collaborated with to do the work, because I feel like this kind of work you don't just do individually, you kind of rely on not just documents or archival material, but you're also like, you know, seeking out like embodied knowledges, right? Like how has collaboration, you know, what's the tea on the collaboration?
For me, when I showed my mom the work, I was extremely nervous. Like I went to the bathroom to cry before I showed her because I was like, that was a lot. And the reaction was good. She said that was much better than I expected. And then she said the second half really needs work. Gave me a bunch of notes on how to fix things, and I had to be like, you know, it's over. I'm not gonna work on it. The next project. So I think, yeah, that's like my fun story. It's real.
I think for me, well, one funny thing was my parents said, is the blurry thing gonna is it gonna go into focus? because a lot of the, you know, the point clouds are super fragmented and low res because of the process of them being crowdsourced videos from mobile phones. So that was one like kind of funny thing, but in general, it was, I think making this project created a platform to have conversations with my mother that maybe otherwise wouldn't have happened in such an intentional way. She came to the US in the 80s, which is when a lot of this generation of, that's when this like massive wave of Ethiopian diaspora was created, because it was during what's known as or the Red Terror. There was this militaristic government, and it was really terrible. And so a lot of my family members just don't talk about that period of time at all. They talk about their memories from before that, but that's kind of just this like blacked out period of time. So this created kind of a safe platform to talk about some more uncomfortable, but also like a range of memories, you know.
Obviously, my parents haven't seen this yet. I can speak a little bit more about my personal experience sharing my work with my family. I actually have worked on some of my stuff with my dad before. Like he would help me like edit my script. So it's fun, and then through that process, I kind of tell like, you know, share with them my work. But actually, I think for this particular one, a lot of our collaboration with people have been people on site at the places that we were going to. It actually left, at least for me, a lot of personal emotions through my interactions with these people. Not that is not necessarily reflected in the work, I would say, but it is a huge part of our process. For example, when we went to Idaho, we met this old lady who has been running a Chinese restaurant for it's a very small town in Idaho, along the border with Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, actually, where the 3 states intersect. And it's a very white part of the country. And then she like told us like crazy stories about how she she left China and swam to Hong Kong to escape Cultural Revolution, and then she ended up there and never went back, and she like basically hates China, and I think America is great, and then she never experienced any racism ever. Literally, like, and then, you know, like, it's like crazy stories, and then she told us all her family drama. It's really crazy. It's weird for us to be going in there and then sharing spaces with people that have been there for a long time, and then that is their decided a home of choice. Maybe not choice, but that's their home now. So it is, I don't know how to describe that. I don't know how, I still don't know if that is ever even in the film at all, because I feel like we went there with a very particular purpose. but they're all these stories that came along the way that I think became part of the work, hopefully, but just not like explicitly, I think.
Yeah, I remember the first day when we met the lady, she asked us if we were spies. And I mean, in what sense, right? Like maybe we are. And as we're looking at all of the audience right now and waiting for the questions to come, and but it's kind of, I mean, wait. Speaking of, I wasn't sure if the question was about how family members feel about our works or about our collaborators per se, but my dad banged his head on the wall or like was performing after he saw my works, and he was like, "Oh my God, so all my money went." Like, that's all the, like, you know, the money sent you to the US for study went. So I was, and then he was like, "I have no idea what you're making," and like something like, but he was making fun of it, obviously. But I see so many like interesting, like I guess like with the lady that we saw, even though like at the beginning she had like skeptical thoughts about who we are, like she gave us so much care. Like after we had the conversation, like she really treated us like almost like her daughters, and yeah, just like the stories that she told us, and also the fact that she really wanted education, but it's something that she still didn't get after she moved to the US because the struggles for survival. Yeah, we do definitely think these people, even though they're not present in the shots, but are collaborators in the film because they really formed our experience and they really formed how we decided to edit those footages and how to construct these narratives.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the honesty too. Do we have any other questions, Linda? Oh, great.
Yeah, I have so many, but I'll just do one for everyone's sake. In Red Threads, the scene where you're tied up and like there's sort of like the commanding thing going on, that tickles like a very specific sort of like emotional space for me, and I was wondering if you could just expand on that and maybe like how like the command flaws and all of that stuff maybe work.
Well, what kind of emotional space did it take for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say like it reminds me very much of like there's like an echo of like I think sort of intergenerational behavior that I see in my family. Like my mom's from China and she lived through the Cultural Revolution, so like I feel like sometimes I see her restraining that type of like authoritarian command figure behavior, but other times it seems like there's also like this tacit acceptance of that.
Yeah, I think the decision behind that is multifold. Like I do think of my mom, who is also an artist and a choreographer. I think that when she speaks to her students, or like to me when she's trying to pose me for photos, you know, she very much speaks to me in that way. But also I think, you know, my personal life directing with my friends or actors, I think like that's conveying myself as well. The consideration of putting in this part of, you know, having my friend play as a character that's similar to me, have my voice, my sins, and then myself showing at the very end, I think it's a more personal process of always making work that's very close to my life, but not necessarily putting, like, also feeling like I need to hide myself in it for some reason. And so I think that this was my process of reckoning with, you know, this is what I want, I'm expressing it in the work, and I'm slowly trying to positioning myself more to the front of it, is what it's called. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question up here.
Hi everyone, thank you so much, Carrie, for this beautiful curation, and thank you so much for sharing your work, everyone. I have a question for you, Yuchi. So you mentioned that you're going through immigration, or you have this portal with your mom through the screen, that I think it related to the idea of like developing artificial intimacy. So my question is, I brought it down to that. How does working with the simulation of your mom replace the actual need for physical connection? Thank you.
You know, that's a really good question. I guess the real answer is it doesn't, right? I think that what we talk about with interface before, at the end of the day, this is my interface. And this is my attempt at communicating to her that I love you. But whether she understands it or if this is able to create any sort of real intimacy, I think it's up to her. I would say based on her reaction, she has felt it, but I think in my own art making, I do often feel this confliction of, you know, how do you make something about someone you love and is very close to? And is your kind of self-absorption, the process of making this, overpowering your actual connection with this person? I made a lot of work about my mom. I always felt that way with her, but I think in this kind of intensity as she also makes work about our relationship, I think there's some kind of dialogue in the art making itself. And so I'm not sure if this really addresses your specific question, but that's the answer I can give right now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and we have one final question. Okay, thank you guys all for putting this together and exploring these histories. My question is, when dealing with like this embodied knowledge, our ancestral wisdom, and displaying it in these ways that connect the present with the past, I wonder how you guys anticipate or forecast how technology can blend in creating a future that the dissociation between these two identities or this place within identities, where it exists in a way that is more comforting. If you have any, all of you, it's open to all of you, even the curator of this, how do you guys rectify that or imagine that space being occupied?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. Thank you so much. And for me, I think it's all about the process. I think whatever technology I'm using, especially 3D animation, which is my preferred medium, it's really about the process of making. And while I'm in front of my computer, while I'm building my 3D models, making, you know, if we go technical here, like meshes and working with the vertices, it's like sculpting in a way where the subconscious taps in. And through that process, I really feel this, you know, almost sense of relief in that I have this space that's so internal and introspective, and I get to process these complex things that with a very clear mind, I may not have been able to. So it's like through the process of creating, I find comfort. And that's been an ongoing process for me, and I think it'll last for a long time as long as I have the privilege to be able to create things.
Does it naturally go to me now?
I was just looking at you, but anyone can answer.
I feel like our film probably is the least technology. Like there has been less technology than other films. But I feel like even when it's just a digital film, but like it's projected on the screen, it's no longer analog form, or like it's no longer a reality that we're encountering like in real life. And so I guess it is a digital entity, even if it's shot by 16mm. After it's translating to a digital format, it's a digital world. And I see them as ghost of reality. And like just a digital circuit of the reality. So I feel like kind of like what I was saying about all of us are exploring the concept of home in a digital realm, or in the other world, in the third world. That's kind of how I see technology.
Yeah, I also think about both of your piece, To Draw a House, as this exploration of movement, even though it's only featured in a few shots, but movement itself relates to the body and relates to knowledge systems that aren't quite clear and material. I think you're both exploring a sense of immateriality and transience, and through that process, this sense of embodiment really happens. So I would say you're working with different types of technologies, definitely, so yeah.
I'll just say really quick, I just admire the possibility of creating an imagined space, even through our bodies, or whether it is through the technology that I personally don't know how to use. So that is what I'm interested in, I guess.
I think for me, I guess along similar lines of what you've all been saying, the technology really plays the role of, it's a tool that allows me then to redefine, reconstruct, and I guess specifically with photogrammetry, when I was originally starting to work on footage, I was looking at a bunch of 3D assets and looking at how I might construct this world, but then I realized that a lot of the ones that already exist there that you can, just like download and use really had nothing to do with the context that I was looking to speak to. And that's an African context, that's an Ethiopian context, that's this like niche Cleveland Ethiopian restaurant context. And so the freedom to just capture, reconstruct, and then build my narrative was how I guess the technology came into play as this powerful tool.
I think for me, it also traces back to memory making, as we're saying, whether it is through video or making sims. I feel that, what we were talking about earlier, not knowing exactly where you belong, I feel that the only place I belong is my body, my existence in this place and now. And so in that sense, for me, I use sims because it's very close to me, it's very personal to me. It feels like an extension of my own body, my own craft in certain ways. I may not necessarily work with different 3D mediums in the same way because I don't feel that personal connection. And so in that sense, I believe in the medium specificity and my personal relationship to the technology that's being used in terms of creating this reality.
Thank you. Like I was paying attention to everything everyone was saying, but I moved away from the mic. I wanted to say that I'm actively listening and thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, round of applause to all this concludes the 2-day LACE screening program of Also a Ruin of Memory. Thank you once again to the entire LACE team for all your support. And please stay tuned for future events at LACE. There are postcards outside with upcoming events and dates, so they're all really exciting. I'm especially excited about Abundance, as well as other projects that are coming up and in the works. So please grab a postcard on your way out. And yeah, the screening video works they will be online in a week or so. So if you missed the first day, you can also go on the LACE website in a week to watch the full program, and the panels are also recorded and will be available on the LACE website. So thank you again, and yeah, mingle, hang out. Thank you.
Thank you.